The part I keep coming back to isn't the money. It's the way my daughter Hazel looked at me the morning after, over her cereal bowl, and said, "Dad, you were the smartest one in the room, weren't you?" She's 9. She doesn't fully understand what happened. But somehow she got it exactly right. I run a small electrical contracting business out of Kelowna, British Columbia. Just me and 2 other guys. My cousin Derek and a kid named Pavel, who I took on 2 years ago when he aged out of foster care and needed a trade. We do residential work mostly. Panel upgrades, EV charger installs, the occasional commercial job when something comes through. Nothing glamorous. I drive a 2017 F-150 with a cracked dashboard and a heating unit that only works if you smack it twice on the left side. I own my house. Just barely. It's a 3-bedroom rancher on the east side of town, the kind of neighborhood where people still leave their doors unlocked and the kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. Hazel has been with me full-time since she was 4. Her mom, Renee, left not out of cruelty, but out of a restlessness that neither of us could fix. She's in Vancouver now. She calls on birthdays and sometimes on Tuesdays for reasons neither of us can explain. Hazel loves her the way kids love a parent they can't quite hold on to, completely, and a little bit heartbrokenly. But she also loves our Tuesday pizza nights and the fact that I taught her how to change her own bike tire and the book series she and I read together before bed, 1 chapter at a time. That's my life. That's the whole picture. And I'm not complaining. I built it the way I build most things, carefully, with the right tools, and with a reasonable understanding of what can go wrong. The call came in on a Wednesday morning in late September, just as the last of the Okanagan summer was giving up on itself. A woman named Daphne, calling on behalf of a residential property in the Upper East Bench area, the kind of address where houses don't have neighbors so much as they have distant peers. She said there was an issue with the electrical in the main guest wing. The previous electrician had looked at it twice, couldn't sort it, and now the property manager was trying a different approach. I almost passed. We had a panel job already scheduled in West Kelowna, and Pavel was off sick, but Derek said go, that he'd handle the panel, and so I loaded up the truck and drove up the long gravel road past the iron gate and the vineyard, and the view that made me slow down even though I was already running 10 minutes behind. The house was the kind of house that makes you recalibrate. Not flashy in the way that new money sometimes is. No gold fixtures, no oversized columns. It was understated in the way that old money, or very patient new money, tends to be. Wide stone steps, timber framing, a wall of glass facing the valley, the kind of build where every material was chosen by someone who actually knew what they were choosing. Daphne met me at the door. She was the estate manager, mid-50s, efficient and not unfriendly. She walked me through the issue. The guest wing, which was larger than my entire house, had a recurring fault. Lights flickering, one circuit tripping intermittently, a bathroom exhaust fan that cut out without warning. 2 different electricians had looked at it. One had suggested rewiring the entire wing at a cost that made me raise my eyebrows when she said it out loud. The other had replaced a breaker and called it done. The fault had come back within 2 weeks. Daphne showed me the panel. She showed me the wing. She gave me whatever access I needed and told me the owner was home but busy and preferred not to be disturbed. I spent about an hour and a half on it. I didn't rush. I traced the circuit the way my old foreman used to teach. Not from the panel outward, but from the fault backward. You follow the ghost. You ask it where it came from. About 40 minutes in, I found it. A loose neutral in a junction box inside the wall cavity behind the master bath of the guest suite. Not dangerous in the dramatic sense, but exactly the kind of chronic gremlin that makes lights flicker and fans quit and drives people halfway to a full rewire they don't need. The box hadn't been properly secured during the original build. Over the years, with the slight movement all houses have, the connection had worked itself loose. Not the breaker, not the wiring. A connector that had never been seated quite right and had finally given up pretending. The fix took less than 20 minutes. The part involved was worth about $4.80 Canadian. I was writing up the work order when she walked in. I didn't know who she was. That's important to understand. To me, she was just the homeowner, and I'd already started mentally composing the awkward moment where I explain that the bill for 2 hours of my time is going to feel disproportionate to a $4 part. She was around 50, maybe a touch younger. Dark hair pulled back without fuss, wearing what I would later come to understand was a very expensive version of nothing. Jeans, a linen shirt, flat shoes. No jewelry except a watch that I wouldn't have been able to identify then, though I can now. She looked like someone who had decided a long time ago that she didn't need to look like anything in particular. She asked how it went. I told her what I found. I showed her a photo on my phone of the junction box before I'd fixed it. I always document, and I explained in plain language what the problem had been and why the previous guys had missed it. She listened without interrupting, which in my experience is rarer than it should be. Then she asked, "What would you have charged to rewire the wing?" I told her, roughly $8,000 to $10,000, depending on what we found inside the walls. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The first electrician quoted 11.5. I didn't say anything. There wasn't much to say. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not suspicious, not grateful yet, something in between. She said, "So you're telling me it was a loose connection inside a junction box?" I said yes. She said, "And it cost you less than $5 to fix?" I said the part, yes. My time was on top of that, obviously. And then she said something that changed the direction of the next 3 months of my life. She said, "I want to offer you a different job, a bigger one, and I'd like to make it interesting." Her name was Isabel Renard. I looked her up that night after Hazel was in bed, sitting at my kitchen table with a lukewarm cup of tea. I don't want to overstate it, but the results were disorienting. She had built a real estate development company from a single property purchase in Calgary in her early 30s into something that operated across 4 provinces and 2 American states. She was on 2 corporate boards. There was a profile piece in a national business magazine from 3 years ago that used the word formidable, twice in the first paragraph. She was, by any reasonable measure, one of the most financially successful people in the Okanagan, and she wanted to hire me to oversee the full electrical renovation of a commercial property she was converting in downtown Kelowna. The interesting part was the condition. She had, apparently, been burned. Not once. The previous conversion project she'd done, a heritage building in Penthouse, had gone $90,000 over budget on electrical alone, partly due to what she described as a contractor who had a habit of finding problems that didn't exist. She had paid for it. She had moved on, but she had not forgotten. Her proposal was this: she would hire me for the Kelowna project. The estimated scope was significant. We were talking about a 4-story building, mixed commercial and residential, full panel upgrade, all new wiring throughout, EV infrastructure in the underground parkade, smart building integration. It was the kind of job that would have taken my company a year and kept all 3 of us, plus 2 additional hires, fully employed. But she wanted a performance clause. The target budget for electrical was set at $420,000. If I came in under that number, I kept a percentage of the savings, up to a defined cap. If I came in over, and this was the part she delivered without drama, the way someone states a fact rather than makes a threat, the overrun would come out of my final payment, dollar for dollar, until my fee hit 0. I sat across from her in the kitchen of that house on the east bench, with my work order on the table between us, and I looked at her. I said, "That's not a standard contract." She said, "No, it isn't." I said, "That puts most of the financial risk on me." She said, "It puts the risk on whoever is responsible for the outcome. If that's you, then yes." I didn't answer right away. I drove home with the windows down, even though it was cold enough that I probably shouldn't have, and I thought about it the entire way. I want to be honest about what I was thinking, because it wasn't entirely noble. Part of me was thinking about the money. A job that size would change things. It would let me buy out Derek's informal share properly, put something aside for Hazel's university, fix the F-150's heating without wincing at the invoice. Part of me was also thinking about the risk, which was real and not small. And a third part of me, the part that had been doing this work for 18 years, was thinking about the junction box. I had found what 2 other electricians had missed. Not because I was smarter, because I was patient, and because I follow the fault backward instead of forward, and because I have never once in my professional life recommended a repair I couldn't justify to myself at 4 in the morning. I called Daphne the next morning and said I wanted to meet with Isabel Renard again. We met at the property. It was a Wednesday in early October, One of those Okanagan fall days that looks like a painting and smells like wood smoke and dying leaves. The building was on a block that was half transformed. New restaurants on 2 corners, a coffee shop that had been there since before I was born on a third, a vacant lot where something ambitious was probably coming. The building itself was solid. 1940s construction, brick face, good bones. The previous life had been a mix of office tenants and a ground floor printer that had closed. She walked me through it herself. No Daphne, no assistant. Just her and me and the sound of the building settling around us. She knew it. She'd bought it 8 months ago, and she could tell me which load-bearing elements had been reinforced, and when the roof membrane was last replaced, and why the south stairwell had that slight list to the left. She'd done her homework the way someone does their homework when they actually care and not just when they need to appear to. I asked questions, a lot of them. She answered all of them. At the end, standing in the empty 4th floor with the valley visible through the unwashed windows, I told her I'd take the job. Under her conditions. She didn't smile exactly. She extended her hand and said, "Don't make me regret it." I said, "I'm going to hold you to the same standard." She raised an eyebrow. It was the first time I saw something close to amusement on her face. I won't pretend the next several months were easy. They were the hardest working months of my adult life, and also, if I'm being completely honest, some of the most absorbing. We brought on 2 electricians from a crew I'd worked alongside on a hotel project in Vernon. Good people, careful workers. I ran every line of the budget personally. I sourced materials through 3 different suppliers and negotiated in a way I'd never had to before, because I'd never had this much on the line before. I read the specifications for the smart building integration 3 times, until I understood it well enough to have a real conversation with the systems integrator, which saved us from 2 change orders that would have added roughly $18,000 to the scope. Derek thought I'd lost my mind. He said that once, directly, over a takeout dinner at my kitchen table after Hazel had gone to bed. He said the contract was set up for me to fail, that a woman like that, with money like that, doesn't hand regular guys like us a clean deal, that there was something in it for her that I wasn't seeing. I thought about that a lot. He wasn't wrong to say it, I just didn't think he was right. Isabel stopped by the site about once a month. Never announced, never disruptive. She'd walk, observe, ask 1 or 2 questions that were always better than they appeared on the surface. She didn't talk to my crew beyond a hello. She didn't try to redirect or second guess. But she was paying attention. In December, she arrived on a Thursday afternoon and found me on my back under the 2nd floor mechanical room tracing a conduit run that wasn't matching the original drawings. She waited. When I came out, there was a coffee on the saw bench next to my tool bag. She hadn't brought one for herself. I found that slightly funny and didn't say so. I asked her once. It was January, we were about 6 months in, the parkade wiring was nearly done. Why she'd taken the chance on me. A guy with a crew of 3 and no portfolio project anywhere near this scale. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because you charged me for a junction box repair and 2 hours of labor, and you could have walked out of there with $12,000, and I never would have known the difference." I said, "That's not how I work." She said, "I know. That's what I just said." Hazel came to the site once, on a Saturday in February when school was out for a professional development day, and I needed to be there for a building inspector visit. I set her up in the site office with her book and her lunch, and told her not to touch anything. The inspector was a man named Rod who had been doing this work in Kelowna for 30 years, and who greeted Hazel with the kind of cheerful directness that kids respond to immediately. He asked her what she was reading. She showed him. He told her his granddaughter liked the same series. Afterward, walking to the truck, Hazel slipped her hand into mine and said, "The lady was there." I said, "What lady?" She said, "The one with the nice watch." She waved at me through the window. I hadn't known Isabel was on site. I hadn't seen her, Hazel said. She looked like the kind of person who decides things. I didn't know what to say to that. I said, "Yeah, she kind of is." We finished in late March. The final number came in at $391,000, $29,000 under the target. My percentage of that, as defined in the contract, was 30% of savings up to $50,000, which came out to a check for $8,700 on top of my contracted fee. It wasn't Lamborghini money. It wasn't life-changing in the way of movies, but it was real, and it was clean, and I had earned every dollar of it in a way that I could explain to Hazel without leaving anything out. I went to the final walkthrough alone. Isabel was there with her lawyer and her project manager. The building was transformed. You could see what it was going to become, the bones of it now dressed in something purposeful. We walked every floor. Everything held. The smart system ran its diagnostics without a fault. At the end, in the lobby, she handed me the final payment documentation and shook my hand and said, "You came in under." I said yes. She said, "The first electrical contractor I used on a project like this told me the budget was too tight. Then he spent 4 months finding reasons it was tighter than he'd said." I didn't say anything, she said. "I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've learned that the most expensive thing in any renovation is not the materials and not the labor. It's the person who knows which problem to solve and which one doesn't exist." I thought about the junction box. I thought about $4.80, I said. My old foreman used to say that, more or less. She said, "Smart man." I drove home with the windows up this time, because March in Kelowna still has edges. I picked Hazel up from her after-school program, and we got Thai food, and she told me at length about a disagreement she'd had with her best friend Gracie, about the correct way to organize a bookshelf, and I gave it my full attention, because that's the job too. That night after she was in bed, I sat at the kitchen table, and I thought about what Derek had said, about how a woman like that doesn't hand regular guys like us a clean deal. And I thought he was still, technically, not wrong. It wasn't a clean deal. It was a hard deal, an unusual deal, a deal that put the weight on me and kept it there for 6 months. But it was a fair one. And I've learned, through years of doing this work in houses and buildings and basements and parkets, that fair and clean are not always the same thing, and that fair is the one that matters. There's a framed drawing on my fridge. Hazel made it sometime in January, during one of the Saturdays when I was on site. She drew the building, remarkably accurately for a 9-year-old. She had a photo of the exterior on her tablet, and in front of it she drew a small figure in a hard hat that is, I can confirm, meant to be me. Across the top in her careful printing she wrote, "My dad fixed it." She doesn't know the details. She knows her dad worked hard on something big for a long time, and that it came out the way it was supposed to. She knows I came home tired most nights, and still made dinner, and still read her chapters before bed, and still showed up at her school concert in February with my good jacket that I'd had to press myself, because I forgot until the last minute. She knows, in the way kids know things without fully being able to articulate them, that her dad does the right thing even when there's no one checking. That's the part that matters. That's the part that or rather, that job, that year, that leap I almost didn't take, bought for us. Not the $8,700. The proof of something I wanted her to have. Something I wanted to give her before she was old enough to need it. A clear picture of what it looks like to do your work honestly, to stand behind your numbers, to walk into a room where you're the smallest name and do the best job anyway. I still drive the F-150. I did get the heating fixed, finally. Pavel used the bonus I gave him from the project to put a deposit on his first apartment. Derek took me out for a beer and said, with the particular gruffness he uses when he's actually proud of something, that I'd done all right. And Hazel, the morning after I told her the job was done and the numbers had come in right, looked up at me over her cereal bowl with those serious brown eyes and said, "Dad, you were the smartest one in the room, weren't you?" I said, "I just found the right problem." She considered that for a moment, then went back to her cereal. I think she'll understand it someday. I think when she has her own hard decisions, and she will, she's already the kind of person who makes hard decisions carefully. She'll remember that her dad once bet 6 months of everything he had on knowing which problem was the right one to solve, and that it came out the way it was supposed to. That's enough. That's more than enough.